Baker, former clutterholic and borderline hoarder, wanting to share with you the final results of the 2-question survey that many of you have really kindly answered online. The results haven't actually changed much from what they were a few days ago. The 2 questions were: what's your biggest challenge with your clutter right now? And what type of clutter are you struggling with most? Now, overwhelm, unsurprisingly, has remained the #1 challenge that people are facing with their clutter challenge. And it is a huge problem when you're trying to deal with your clutter. If you feel overwhelmed, you're not going to necessarily even be able to start to deal with your clutter. Your brain is literally overwhelmed. It's got too many things going on. So it's hardly surprising that that's the biggest challenge that people are saying that they're struggling with right now. In terms of the type of clutter that people are struggling most with, there are 2 in first place. There's paperwork clutter and there's general mixed clutter, what I call big and bulky backlog clutter. It's a higgledy-piggledy mix of different types of clutter. Now, in terms of the paperwork, the good news is that we've already got the clutter clearing workshop that enables you to start dealing with your paperwork clutter. When the pandemic began, I was thinking, how can I help people clear their clutter, without having to visit them in their home, but equally a type of clutter that they can start working on that doesn't require them to take things to a charity or a thrift store, doesn't require auctioneers to be open. We can get on and deal with the type of clutter without having to necessarily leave our home. And paperwork clutter was the obvious place to start, because even during the pandemic, it didn't matter whether or not the shops and the charity places were closed, because we were still getting our curbside collection for recycling. So as long as we shredded any unwanted paperwork clutter, we could still get working on our paperwork clutter. It also enables us to flex that decision-making muscle, build our confidence, and learn how to make decisions. So the good news is that we've already got the paperwork clutter covered in terms of getting started with our paperwork clutter. But clearly the general mixed, what I call big and bulky backlog clutter, is something that we could definitely work on getting some advice on. Now, in terms of the overwhelm, which was overwhelmingly the most popular answer to what the biggest challenge is right now, just a couple of things just to explain what overwhelm is, because it can mean slightly different things to different people. The technical definition of overwhelm is to bury or drown beneath a huge mass of something, or to have strong emotional effect. Now, of course, both those descriptions can apply to our clutter, because bury or drown beneath a huge mass of something, well, clearly we have a lot of things in our clutter. If you don't have a lot of things in your clutter, then actually you're just a bit disorganized and you need to tidy up. When I talk about clutter, I am talking about a significant volume of things that we have in our home that is taking up space and causing us to struggle to live comfortably. I work with people who have visible clutter in at least 3 rooms or areas of their home and have had it for at least 3 years. So that, by definition, means that they are going to be overwhelmed by their clutter, because that is very definitely a huge mass of something, a huge mass of our belongings. But not only have we got that huge mass of something, we also, 9 times out of 10, have a strong emotional effect on that huge mass of things. One of the big reasons why we struggle to deal with our clutter is because we know we're going to have to revisit memories and thoughts and feelings that are buried in our clutter. It's not uncommon for me to work with people who will see the clutter on the surface, and then once they start dealing with it, they uncover other things that they'd forgotten about that are beneath that visible clutter on top. And then they get a really strong emotional response to it, very often negative. And that can literally freeze us. We don't know what to do. Oh my goodness, I'm not ready to go there and deal with that feeling or that memory. And so we feel overwhelmed and we just avoid it, don't we? We put it off for another day because the emotion is overwhelming. That is, of course, if we are able to overcome the overwhelm that we've got from the mass of things in our clutter. Again, both can cause us to just struggle to deal with our clutter challenge. It can cause us to struggle to think clearly, make decisions. That's even if we know how to make decisions, because there is a particular way that we need to make decisions when we're dealing with our clutter. Keep, chuck, charity doesn't work, does it? Blitzing doesn't work. Being ruthless. How many times have we cleared our clutter and lived to regret it later on? So again, there's so much involved with this issue of overwhelm that actually getting started with dealing with our clutter, can be almost impossible because of that sense of overwhelm. Now, overwhelm can be what they call either short-term bursts or long-term overwhelm. Now, you may be familiar with this. So if you've had blitzes on your clutter, you've decided, right, I'm going to literally roll up my sleeves, I'm going to get the bin bags out, and I am going to be ruthless with my decision making, and I am going to clear this clutter. So we set aside maybe a few hours or a few days or maybe a weekend, and we are going to clear our clutter. And we put ourselves under huge pressure to make decisions. Usually we regret them later on, but that's a whole other issue. So that is what we would call a short-term burst. So we set out at the beginning of the day, start at 9 o'clock and keep going as long as we can. That's if we can overcome that overwhelm of figuring out how and where to start. Then we get to the emotional things in our clutter, and it becomes a little bit harder and a little bit harder, and before we know it, within a very short space of time, even though we may have set aside the whole morning or the whole day or the whole weekend to work on our clutter, we just grind to a halt, don't we, because of the overwhelm. I did that so many times when I had my clutter challenge 20 years ago. Really good intentions, just poor execution, as I call it. I didn't have a method. I didn't have a strategy for how to actually clear my clutter, how to make decisions. I was just literally going through the piles, weeding out what I knew could go, being ruthless with my decision making. And that short-term burst of mental, emotional and physical energy was exhausting. I think I probably averaged about 3 or 4 hours maximum. And they would usually end with me sitting on the floor, going through a pile, weeding out things, getting lost in the memory of a photo or a book or something. And before I knew it, I'd run out of time, energy, more often than not, the will to live. And I gave up because I was just so overwhelmed. It had taken me perhaps 10-15 minutes to try and make a decision on something in my clutter. I wouldn't know what to do with it. I couldn't make a decision, so I would just move it into another pile. So I'd end up moving the piles from corner to corner, room to room. I'd take the next thing in the pile that I was working on, try and make a decision on that, and either spend however long daydreaming and reminiscing about that thing and what I intended to do with it, and well, I haven't used it, so but it might come in use. Oh, I don't know what to do. Oh, I'll put it in that pile. What's the next thing? So I was essentially just weeding out what I knew could go. I would find that I would spend a long time going through very few things. And so maybe I would take a break for a cup of tea mid-morning, and I would just think, I have achieved nothing. I have moved it, it looks a bit different, but I haven't actually really cleared any clutter. Oh, what's the point? Gonna give up. Okay, you might be familiar with this scenario. So that was a short-term burst. Equally, It could be that we have long-term overwhelm. So again, if you've ever been in a situation where you feel like you should be clearing your clutter, so you kind of sort through the piles as you sit there maybe on the couch watching TV, so you're kind of half-heartedly sort of, yeah, okay, well, yeah, if it can go, I'll put it in the black sack, I'll put it in the rubbish in the trash, you know, but I'm kind of multitasking, I'm doing more than one thing, but at least I feel like I'm doing something. So it's almost like an endless attempt to clear our clutter. And that can lead to, again, overwhelm, because again, the things in our clutter have emotions attached to them. They have memories. There can be a lot of things attached to each and every item, which in itself is overwhelming, trying to recall everything associated with that item. So that would be long-term overwhelm with our clutter. Not just because we've had our clutter for a long time, but also because we've tried to make decisions for a long time. Any of these things sounding familiar? Because if anything I'm saying here sounds familiar, please, please, please know you are perfectly, perfectly normal. Now, you may be familiar with the negative effects of feeling overwhelmed, generally the long-term type of overwhelm. So if you felt overwhelmed by your clutter for more than just you know, a few months, then the impact that can have can affect our self-esteem, because we feel like we're not getting anywhere. We're not managing to actually clear our clutter. We're not seeing and feeling a difference. Yeah, we might be seeing that the piles are moving from corner to corner, room to room, but we're not actually seeing much more space. We're not actually seeing and feeling a difference. I still feel overwhelmed. I still don't know how I'm going to deal with all of this. I'm still feeling overwhelmed by how long this is going to take me to deal with. And that can really affect our self-confidence. As in, well, I'm not achieving anything, so what's the point? I'll give up. I just got to accept that I'm going to spend the rest of my life living like this. So it can really negatively impact our self-confidence and our self-esteem and our belief that we can clear our clutter. I had a lady, 10 years ago now, and she was in her late 70s, early 80s, can't remember exactly how old, and she just reached a point of saying, I am not going to live my remaining years living like this. If it takes me a couple of years to clear my clutter, I will do it. Because she'd also had the experience where she had two daughters, one of whom was a hoarder, the other one wasn't a hoarder. And sadly, the daughter that was a hoarder passed away due to breast cancer. And the daughter that wasn't a hoarder wanted to literally just get skips and dumpsters and clear the other sister's property so that they could sell it and just move on. Whereas the mother, who was also a hoarder, understood that the daughter who was the hoarder, who had passed away, had these things for a reason, and she wanted to treat her belongings with respect. And because she thought, well, hang on, if my other daughter, who isn't a hoarder, is up for just blitzing and clearing and putting in a dumpster or a skip everything that my other daughter owns, she's going to do that when I pass away, and I don't want her to throw all of my possessions away as if they're meaningless. Understandably, the other daughter wanted to do that because she felt overwhelmed. She didn't know how to start sorting through her sister's clutter. But the mother said, no, I will take this on. I will sort through my late daughter's belongings and her clutter, and I will sort through my clutter. And that lovely lady, she spent 3 years clearing her daughter's clutter and her own clutter. Obviously she'd learnt the skills. She knew how to clear her clutter. She obviously managed to overcome the overwhelm. So I was helping her. She was on her clutter clearing journey. It wasn't obviously full time that she was doing that. She was setting aside a couple of hours a day for 5 days a week. She managed to clear her daughter's hoard, and she managed to clear her own hoard. And every year that I checked in with her after she had succeeded at clearing her daughter's hoard and her own hoard, she said every every day, every month, every year that passes, I am clutter free. The value of that year, the things that I have been able to do that I couldn't do when I had my clutter, far outweigh the fact that it took me 3 years to sort my daughter's clutter and my own clutter. But she had to build up that confidence and belief that she could do it, because obviously in her late 70s she had not been confident that she could actually clear her clutter, let alone her daughter's clutter. So again, we need to get to a point where we believe that we can actually clear our clutter. Otherwise, the overwhelm is just going to sabotage any attempt that we have to clear our clutter. And obviously it can make us feel inadequate. If you've had your clutter challenge for a while, if you've had it in 3 or more rooms for 3 or more years, then you probably feel like a failure. I did. Former clutterholic, a borderline hoarder. I felt completely useless. Now the irony was that my job was I was actually a PA office manager, and then I was a project manager. I was working on a £250 million project at the time that I was also struggling with my clutter challenge. I had no problems with recommending that the client pay £1 million, £2 million a week. This was 20 years ago, so £250 million was, I think it was the biggest project of its time back then. I had no problems with doing that. I presented a very professional and organised appearance to the outside world. But when I got home, I just felt completely inadequate. I felt like a complete failure, and I felt overwhelmed. So again, this issue of overwhelm, it doesn't surprise me that this is the biggest challenge that people are saying that they have in relation to their clutter. So my plan over the next few days and weeks is to put together something that will enable you to start to understand this issue of overwhelm in a bit more detail. I've kind of touched on some of the things now, but again, there's some basic things that if we actually understand the why of the overwhelm, what's going on? What's our brain doing? Why is it that I'm feeling overwhelmed by my clutter? Now we understand actually overwhelm is one of the reasons why we struggle to even get started. Why is that? Okay. One of the things that people on their journey say to me is one of the greatest comforts they get from being on their journey and learning about the what, the why and the how of their clutter challenge is realizing that there are reasons why they struggle, and that they are perfectly normal. So if we can understand the what, the why and the how of overwhelm, then maybe that can make us go, oh, okay, now I understand why I feel overwhelmed. It's okay, perfectly normal, and there are some things that I can actually do to start to overcome that sense of overwhelm. Because if we don't overcome that sense of overwhelm, we are never going to clear our clutter. So I will share with you some more facts and information about this issue of overwhelm in the next few days. But in the meantime, if you answered my online survey, thank you for answering that. Those 2 questions. It's enabled me to see where the greatest need is right now in terms of help and advice to clear our clutter. Hopefully this video has given you a little bit of comfort that you are perfectly normal. It's my mission in life is to make sure that clutterholics and hoarders know that they are perfectly normal. And I shall see you again very soon with some more practical advice, hopefully, so that we can get started on clearing our clutter. In the meantime, take care. See you soon.